Hello everyone, and welcome to the first of a series of talks. Today we are thrilled to have Dr. Oliver Gray. He will give a presentation on the ICC, the global business organization which creates the key reference code for players in advertising. He has several years of experience in effective self-regulation, and he co-chairs the Code Revision Task Force for the International Chamber of Commerce.
Hello. So what is the ICC Code? Well, it was created in 1937 and has been improved in this 10th edition. So it's been around for quite some time. It's the global standard. It's the mother of all codes. So what does that mean? That means that other codes, other principles, they inspire what's inside the ICC Code, but the ICC Code also inspires other codes, other programs, and other principles. It sets thus a common denominator, and where no code locally exists, it's the industry standard. That means that it's also the standard for professional diligence. So if you get into problems with the law and they look for a reference for what is professional conduct, they'll look into the ICC Code, as they will with other self-regulatory codes. So let's understand the interrelationship between the different codes. So first of all, you'll have in-house company codes inside, or your agencies, your companies itself, and then you have your sector-specific codes, principles or commitments, such as the principles that the EDAA has. And then there are national self-regulation codes, such as the Advertising Standards Authority and their CAP code, and in France. Then the international code, the ICC Code that we're talking about today, and there's little bits of guidance that they've got, one on mobile, another one about the resources on OBA. And of course, you've got the legal backstop. So the legal backstop are national and European laws, such as on the Audiovisual Media Services Directive, the Misleading Advertising and Comparative Directive, the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, the General Data Protection Regulation, and the e-privacy regulation, which is going through at the moment. So all of these kind of interrelate, but self-regulation layers itself on top, and it looks to ensure that it's compliant with the law, but it is the standard that business wants to take. And that brings me to the point then of consumer trust. And it's really important that business players follow the self-regulatory rules, because that's how they ensure that consumers can trust the advertising that they see. So we're talking about advertising and marketing communications, and also online behavioral targeting. All of these, they build on this consumer trust that you get there. And these rules are used for the advertising self-regulation systems to ensure that consumers can trust as well how the business follow the rules. So it's really important. And I think it's important if we look at the map across the globe to see where these systems are in place. You've got 52 countries who've got advertising self-regulation systems. And 42 countries have or are developing national codes based on the ICC. So we're talking about something that is not just about Europe, it's something that's really a global phenomenon, and will be increasingly so, because new systems are being set up across the world in these different countries. Let's look first at the structure of the code. So you have the scope, you have the coverage, you have the definitions, and there are 25 general principles in place. I'm not going to go through all of those, but I will highlight some of the key ones. And then there are 4 detailed chapters. One's on sales promotion, the other's on sponsorship, then direct and digital marketing communications, which I'm going to focus on the most in this presentation, and that's where IBA and OBA activities are covered. And then we have environmental claims in marketing communications. So you can see it's quite a widespread aiming code. So first of all, let's look at what does it cover. So the first thing is, we all know it covers advertising. And the definition they use is any form of marketing communications carried by the media, usually in return for payment or other valuable consideration. But it's not just advertising, it's marketing communications. That's much wider. So it includes advertising as well as other techniques. But it also includes such things as promotions, sponsorships, direct marketing, digital marketing communications, and it's to be interpreted very broadly to mean any communications produced directly by or on behalf of marketers intended primarily to promote products or to influence consumer behaviour. So I mentioned that digital marketing communications are included there. These are marketing communications which are using digital interactive media. So you might say to yourself, well, what does digital interactive media mean? Well, the best definition that we could come up with, because it's changing and progressing all the time, at the moment is a full range of media, platforms, and tracking technologies, including mobile, video, addressable TV, social media, the Internet of Things, wearable devices, cross-device tracking, and associated algorithms. So we even took care of AI at the time. Who's covered? Well, we've seen this different mapping that you have of the whole Lumascape. And this is changing all the time, as we know. So first of all, the first people involved are individuals who are employed by companies, by institutions. They should follow these rules. They're the people who are involved in the planning, the creation, the publication or the transmission of marketing communications. Of course, we also have the marketers. On top of the marketers, we spent some time thinking about this new landscape. And there are other participants, the market influencers, the bloggers who've got connections to commercial advertising, the vloggers, affiliate networks, data analytics, and the ad tech companies. Those preparing algorithms and artificial intelligence for marketing communications purposes, they're also included. The creative agencies, of course. And finally, not least, the publishers, the media owners, the contractors of other parties, all of those who publish, they transmit, they deliver or distribute marketing communications, the platforms, the channels. They're all covered by this code. You all play some part in bringing advertising and marketing communications. So, as a rule of thumb, if you're involved in some way in the business of advertising, marketing, communications, data which brings those to people, these rules apply. So let's look a little bit at the general principles. They're very clear for the ICC, and it's been there since 1937, these key principles. First of all, advertising and marketing communications, they should be legal. There's no way that you should not comply with the law. You're compliant with local legislation and also EU legislation as such. So the GDPR in the States, legislation such as copper, they're relevant in different marketplaces. You should ensure that you're decent, so you're respecting global sensitivities of different individual consumers. Being honest and truthful is a really important principle. You should not mislead consumers. And in fact, the largest numbers of complaints are about misleadingness. It should be prepared with a due sense of social responsibility, that's really important, and ensuring that the principles of fair competition are respected. And above all, we shouldn't impair public confidence in the business of marketing. So this is really important, the consumer trust issue. We need to get it right. This is doing the right thing, not interfering with the way that people enjoy their use of the internet or the way that they view things, because this could just impair their trust. And I'm going to be showing you a few examples in a minute of what does this actually mean. So let's look at one example here of truthfulness and substantiation. This is a really key principle. So in the ICC Code, Articles 5 and 9 talk to these points. And the article says marketing communication should not mislead the consumer with respect to the product. All forms of claims relating to verifiable facts should be capable of substantiation at the time of publication. So here's an example. This is from Ireland, and it's a beauty blogger. She has 200,000 odd Instagram followers. Probably by the time you see this video, she'll have a lot more. And basically, she was promoting makeup with a photoshopped image. And it was felt by several members of the public that this was misleading them. Why? Well, because the advertising was showing her wearing makeup, which had a stunning finish and was helpful for problem skin. And she posted it onto her Rimmel foundation account, which was shared by the brand through its Facebook page. When it was investigated by the Irish self-regulatory body, the ASAI, they upheld the complaint because the claim was unproven and the image was heavily photoshopped. So this shows you that whether you've got a blogger linked through to a commercial account, or whether you've just got a commercial operator who's doing it directly, they need to ensure that they do not mislead, that they're truthful, and that people can believe that the claim's there. We're not saying that, for example, here that Facebook had to be, they had to ensure that the content of this particular ad was compliant in terms of the substantiation, but they have to make sure that if a self-regulatory body contacts them and says there's a problem, they will need to look at the decision of the self-regulatory body and respect that. So let's look at another area. One of the things that we felt very strongly about in this new version of the code was there were a lot of complaints from different activists and also public debates that the business was blurring the lines. It was not being very clear when something was commercial or something was not commercial. And we wanted to actually make that very clear that was not true. We hadn't changed the rules in this respect, but we actually wanted to make it much clearer. And so one of the key things we thought about was having much clearer transparency and much clearer identification. And as marketing communications have evolved, then we've got different forms of expression online. So what does the rule say? It says marketing communication should be clearly distinguishable and when appearing in a medium containing news or editorial matter, where appropriate, labelled as such. This is Article 7. So I've got a few examples here. So the first one of these, this was an unlabelled YouTuber celebrities video. It was placed online in the Amazing Phil channel, which had 2.2 million subscribers, possibly more now. But it was not clear that what they were talking about was actually the Oreo lick race. It was something commercial. And it was felt by the UK self-regulatory body that that was not appropriate. It was not identified in the clearest way. So following their intervention, here's the example. You can see it's clearly labelled in the left-hand corner ad, and at the bottom says double stuff Oreo. So it's very clear to people seeing that. So that's a yes for that. One of the other phenomena, of course, is native advertising, which is basically placed within content. It's enhanced content. There's nothing wrong with that, but what's really worthwhile for people to know is when there's commercial stuff placed in there, and especially in this era where people are doubting, are things genuine or not. It's really important to point out this is a commercial area. And this example here, it's very clearly labelled at the bottom, advertising promotion. And so that is, and it has a red box around it, so it's quite clearly identified. The final one I wanted to refer to is some guidance. And in the UK, they've been talking about market influences. And the ASA came out with some guidance, but other self-regulatory jurisdictions have as well, in determining how do you make it clear that there's a tweet that is linked to a commercial operator. So a vlogger is linked to particular things. And so having it labelled hashtag ad, hashtag marketing communication, hashtag advertising, makes it much clearer for the consumer. So let's look at another area. This is an area particularly that there are concerns around the world when they look at children. And it's an area where if you actually look at the number of complaints, they're very low. But the number of debates about does advertising and marketing have an influence on children, or are there special rules, it's a really important one. So the ICC Code makes it very clear there is a special responsibility in the marketing to children. And for the first time, this code clarifies the definitions around what is a child. There are many definitions across the globe, but the code defines children as being 12 and under. It used to talk about young people, now it talks about teens, and teens are below 18 down to the age of 12 as such. The common requirements that you'll find is that obviously that parental supervision and permission is encouraged, so that children will seek permission when they engage in anything that's commercial. You avoid advertising inappropriate products or content to children and teens, and we'll come to some of the examples of what those might be in a minute. We just talked about identifying advertising, that's really important for children, and providing clear and conspicuous disclosures. Kids have a lack of experience compared to adults, so it's really important that when advertising is construed and when it's being communicated, we need to think about a child's inexperience. So we shouldn't prey on a child's inexperience, their incredulity of advertising. We need to show children in safe situations, because children can imitate behaviours they see in advertising. So if it's a particular advertising to them, we need to think of that. Really important is protecting children's privacy. Let's look at an example now of an in-app ad and how targeting comes into place in relation to children. So in the ICC Code, in the chapter specific to direct marketing and digital marketing communications, it says websites devoted to products that are subject to age restrictions such as alcohol, gambling and tobacco products should undertake measures such as age screening to restrict access to such websites by minors. And minors are generally determined through legal legislation. It can vary between countries, but we're talking kind of below 18. So in this example, there's a new Mario Kart 8 trick app, which had a PEGI rating of 3, which means it's suitable for all ages. So you'd think that any advertising going into that would be fine for children. Unfortunately, in this particular one, in the in-app ad, there was a gambling provider, William Hill's online Vegas games, with an install button appeared. The ad was served to under 18-year-olds after Google's ad placement program put it in the Nintendo Mario Kart app. So this shows you that targeting is a really important thing to consider. And this meant, unfortunately, that this type of product was pushed through to minors. In the UK, the ASA, they concluded that the campaign would be seen by quite a few children, and they asked for the removal of this particular one because it did not respect the rule. I now want to show an example, which is a positive one, of how the alcohol industry has engaged with the social media platforms in a partnership to ensure that the ICC rules not to show inappropriate content to minors actually becomes alive. So in this example, the key alcohol producers across the world, 11 of them in the IARD, have signed an agreement with Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat and YouTube back in September 2018 to ensure that the most up-to-date safeguards are used so that marketing communications related to beer, wine and spirits are directed to adults who can legally purchase, to explore what changes can be made to further diminish chances of those underage seeing this type of advertising and exploring ways that people can have greater control over whether they see alcohol advertising and opt out of receiving advertisements for alcohol. I now want to move to the specific area that many of the partners in EDAA are particularly interested in. So the ICC Code has a specific section, it's part of Chapter C, C22, which refers to interest-based advertising and also online behavioural advertising. We use both those terms because in different parts of the world they are being used, and they sometimes mean different things, but we want to make sure that that's covered. The principles that are put in place, they reflect the principles and practices of the different programs that you'll find in the US, in the EU, and in Canada and other places. They include the latest rules on mobile, geolocation, and cross-device. And when there are local rules, these have been updated and will be inspired, for example, on mobile from the ICC Code. So one of the key things that we have, and there are several parts of C22, it talks about respecting the consumer. We talked about consumer trust, and so the first thing it says is if there are wishes not to receive direct marketing, for example, somebody's on the list, or they don't want to have interest-based advertising, then we should respect those wishes. And there are programs, obviously, such as the EDAs, which are put in place to do that. We should think about the targeting with the client with respect to the social norms, the local culture, and align with social responsibility in the different markets. We should look at the potential sensitivities of a global audience, and we should ensure that we don't interfere with the consumer's use of digital interactive media. So what does that mean? That means that online marketing communications don't interfere with the normal experience of consumers. And some of us who are my age will remember 5 or 10 years ago when we had pop-ups continually coming up on the screen and you couldn't proceed to another screen. Very annoying and actually put people off having advertising. Nowadays, there's a great increase in ad blockers because the youngsters don't like some of the pop-ups that come up because it slows their downloads. So these are the types of things we need to think very carefully about. Then notice and choice provisions for interest-based advertising. So I've just highlighted the key parts here. One is that the notice is clear and conspicuous. 2, that user control is we make available a mechanism to exercise the choice of consumers with respect to collection and data use for interest-based advertising. 3, geolocation, make clear ways that sites, apps access, collect and use data, and after the serving of the data is only retained for purposes and periods specified at collection. Finally, cross-device tracking. Disclosures should address many forms of tracking using cookies, fingerprinting, cookie syncing, and so on. And the choices on one device should be reflected on others, and the data is not used. So now to conclude, no code has any sense unless it talks about responsibilities. And the ICC Code makes it very clear about responsibility of all the different actors. So first of all, as I said earlier on, the marketer has overall responsibility for the content and the claims which are in the advertisement or in the marketing communication. But the code makes it very clear that whatever the nature of activity, the medium or the technology, responsibility is shared by all the parties concerned, commensurate with their respective role in the process and the limits of the respective functions. So that means that whatever connection you've got to the planning, the creation, the execution, the use of data in advertising and marketing communications, this code applies to you and you've got responsibilities. And that includes, as I said earlier on, interest-based advertising and those preparing algorithms. And that means that if there are decisions made by self-regulatory bodies concerned in the different countries, you need to respect those decisions. And another thing, think about your contracts. Is it clear in your contracts about the responsibility to follow and to follow the rules and to follow the decisions that are made upstream and downstream? That's really important to check. And if we get this right, then we build trust, we build confidence, not only amongst other business players, but to the consumers and also to governments. And they won't think to come up with more detailed rules. They will trust what self-regulation is doing. So responsibility has, builds up as well the image of the advertising industry as a whole. When I was preparing for this presentation, a couple of questions came to mind talking to EDAA. So one of those was, what should business players follow if there are numbers of different rules? Well, you should always follow what's set out in the law, whether it's local or European. We're not saying that you shouldn't do that. So you need to do that. You need to also follow the principles of the EDA program. But bear in mind there are other self-regulatory considerations about the content, the placement and the appearance of ads in each country, and the ICC Code can help. If you go to a country where there is no code at all in place, the ICC Code is a really helpful instrument. And so outside of Europe, there are several marketplaces where there are no local codes, no self-regulatory bodies in place. So this code is the starting place for you. The second question we had is, what if there is a conflict between, say, some of the detailed rules of codes, the scope, and the ICC? Well, the ICC Code was written to be applicable everywhere. It can't take account of all the strictest of laws, all the business rules. You should follow the applicable local rules if they're at a higher level, but the ICC Code is there to ensure that there is at least a good level that's in place. The second thing is, if you find that there's an area that's not yet in scope in your local program, the ICC Code, as I said at the beginning, it draws on other codes, but it also inspires codes and programs to move forward. So in some of these new technology areas, things like cross-device, mobile, and other areas that the business will be going into, you can expect some mismatches, but over time, they will catch up. So please do look to your local program and also look to the ICC Code as a guide to help move forward the local programs in the way that things evolve. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope that you've learned something about the ICC Code and how it applies in the digital marketing communication area. And always think about doing the right thing and always think about following the rules that are in place. And you will do really good business that consumers will trust.